All right, ladies and gentlemen of D-Class personnel, go ahead and sit down. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Commander. And I'm going to be briefing you on the SCP you're about to go study, so pay attention. What we're looking at today is SCP-2190, Object Class Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. Foundation agents embedded in regional cell phone manufacturers and distributors are to ensure that all phones sold within SCP-2190's active area included modified SIM cards designed to automatically filter calls from SCP-2190. Undercover field agents living near POI 2190-2's place of residence are trusted to monitor and ensure the well-being of POI 2190-2 and her family, as well as dissuade members of the community from believing that POI 2190-3 is anything other than a loving husband. Description: SCP-2190 is a telephonic entity that manifests in communication systems within the country of the Philippines. Records of previous manifestations have shown that SCP-2190 possesses the personality, vocal quality, and financial resources of a deceased Filipino woman designated POI-2190-1. SCP-2190 is capable of calling any mobile phone within a 100-kilometer radius of the home in which POI-2190-2 currently resides. The first SCP-2190 phone call took place on February 5, 2007, 3 days after POI-2190-1 passed away at the age of 78 due to heart failure. SCP-2190 has complete, irrevocable control over POI-2190-1 savings and liquid assets. This encompasses the full breadth of resources possessed by POI-2190-1 prior to her death, as 2190-1 retained complete ownership of these resources even after being declared legally deceased. Suspected anomalous bureaucratic influence is being investigated. All attempts to prevent or limit SCP-2190's access to its financial resources have consistently met with failure. Any attempt to close, transfer ownership, or edit the balance of POI-2190-1's bank account via computerized systems will result in a system error, and any alterations to physical documents pertaining to SCP-2190's wealth will anonymously revert the following day. Additionally, individuals employed at financial institutions will immediately forget any instructions to alter or deny transactions from POI-2190-1's bank account. Every 2 to 3 weeks, SCP-2190 places a phone call to an individual of its choosing. Records indicate that SCP-2190 makes its selections based on the following criteria. The recipient must reside in close proximity to POI-2190-2's place of living. The recipient must possess a reasonable level of physical fitness and intelligence. The recipient must have an urgent need to acquire a large sum of money. SCP-2190 introduces itself during these calls as the mother of designated POI-2190-2, daughter of -1. SCP-2190 will go on to claim that -2 is trapped in an abusive relationship with her husband, Albert -3, and will beg for the recipient of the call to help in ending the relationship between the two. A $5,000 reward is offered for successful termination of the marriage, with 10% delivered up front. If the recipient agrees, SCP-2190 will provide them with -2's present location, as well as the locations of -3 and their son Philip -4. If the individual receiving the call agrees to these terms, they will receive $500 via wire transfer 2 to 3 days later. SCP-2190 was discovered in 2008 during a police investigation into the kidnapping of -4. The abductors had sent -2 a ransom note demanding that she immediately annul her marriage, change her name, and return home to her mother. -2 chose to ignore the demands and enlisted the help of local law enforcement, who successfully located the boy and apprehended his captors. Field agents embedded in the Philippine judiciary brought SCP-2190 to the Foundation's attention when -2's mother, whom the kidnappers named as an accomplice and whom -2 testified to be frequently communicating with, was found to have been deceased for several years. After SCP-2190 was confirmed to be anomalous in nature, -2's family was placed in Foundation custody. They had originally been planned to remain as permanent on-site residents. However, their presence in Site 92 caused SCP-2190 to begin placing calls on confidential Foundation communication networks. As this constituted an unacceptable security breach, the family was administered amnestics and allowed to reintegrate into society. Extensive observation of -2's family life over the subsequent years has shown no evidence of abusive tendencies on the part of -3. Document log. The following is an excerpt from an interview with -2 conducted during her brief time at Site 92. I'll go ahead and read this for you. My mother and father were both born from here in the Philippines, but she left for an American so that she could get a visa and go to the US. I was left with my father. She never tried to contact me until I was 19. She called me on the phone, and I was so surprised because I thought she did not know me or care for me. She told me she had found a husband for me in America and she was sending him to me so we can get married. I told her no, I already have a boyfriend here. And she asked me if he was American. I told her no. Then she says I have to marry an American so I can come to the States. She says it is much better over there. I told her I love my boyfriend, so she calls me names and says I'm so stupid, tells me I have to marry an American. She tells me that after all this time, she still loves me and wants me to be at her house in America with her. Can you imagine? After 19 years, she doesn't talk to me? But even still, she's my mother. And I was happy to know she still loves me, so I told her, I will not leave Albert because I love him very much. But I'll try to get a visa and go to you. She told me it's okay as long as I come be there with her. Then she calls me every week asking me questions about Albert. She asks if he's a Catholic, and I lie to her, yes, because I'm afraid she'll hate him if she knows that he's a Christian. 2 days later, I get a call. My mother's screaming at me all these things. She tells me I need to leave Albert because he's a Christian. I tell her, no, I love Albert. I love that Albert is a Christian, and I'm a Christian now too. She was very upset. She said she would pray for my soul to not go to hell. She said she would pray that Albert would leave me so I would stop being a Christian and be saved. I asked how she found out Albert was a Christian, and she told me she called her family here in the Philippines and asked them to check and found out. She did not call me so much after that. When she talked, she would always tell me how much she loved me and wanted me to live with her in her big house in the US, and every time she called, she would ask me if I left Albert yet or if he left me. Several times Albert would come home from work and get attacked by people telling him he was going to hell. They hit him until he was on the ground, and the women even scratch him with their nails. I think it was maybe my mother's family or friends, but when I asked her, she said she did not know anything about that. Eventually, my mother tells me that she'll pay for my trip to the US and that she'll let me stay with her. She said she's very rich and does not have to work, and that I would not have to work if I went to live with her. This was in 1995. Albert and I were already married and Philip was just born. We did not have so much money, so I got a work visa and decided to come to the States to get a job and send money home to family. I asked my mother if I could stay with her, and she told me it was okay. When I got to the States, there was a, what do you call that? Big, long car? Right. There was a limousine waiting for me at the airport. My mother's house was very big. Her husband was the owner of a company, and he had a lot of money. My mother threw a big party when I arrived. She gave me so many gifts and told me she loved me. She said the house was too big for just her and her husband, and she wanted her real children to be with her. She also told me she wanted Philip to live there too. My mother did not want me to get a job, but I did anyway because I needed to send money to Albert. After a few weeks, my mother came to my room with a very expensive dress and said she would take me to a party at her friend's house. The dress was very nice, and I've been working very hard, so I agreed. But then when we got inside the car, she drove us to some kind of nightclub. I asked her, why are we here? You said we're going to your friend's house. She laughed and told me it was a surprise. She wanted to give me a good time. We were already there, so I went inside. My mother kept telling me to drink, giving me more and more drinks. I did not drink them, but I pretended to. When it was late, my mother brought me to a man named Randall. She said he was rich and that he wanted to sleep with me, and he could even marry me and get me a permanent visa. I asked my mother, is this why you took me here to the States, so you could get me drunk and sleep with an American? Don't you know I'm already married to Albert? She tells me, forget about Albert, that I need to marry an American. Imagine, even though I already have a husband and a son. I made my mother take us home. She was very mad, but she did it anyway. After that, she was always bringing men to the house. She told me again and again that I needed to get married to an American while I'm still beautiful and 26. One night I told her, Mom, please stop. I love Albert very much, not because of money, but because I love him so much and we are so happy together. I told her I will never leave him. Even though it was cruel, I said, I will not abandon my child and my husband like you did. You left us for money and toys and parties, and you never cared about me for 19 years until you realized you wanted me. You don't love me. You only want me like a dress or a doll. You only love yourself. She got so angry then it was like a demon was inside her. She was screaming and screaming and throwing things everywhere. Finally, her husband had to come and take her away to their room. He told her I was an adult and I should marry who I want. And so my mother promised to stop bringing men to the house, but I think it was only to make her husband happy. I told him I wanted to go home, so he bought me a ticket, and I left the next day. When I was back in the Philippines, I did not hear from my mother again until I think 2002. She said her husband had died and she was very lonely. She wanted me to come back to the U.S. and to bring Philip, but Albert would have to stay behind. I told her no, but she kept calling and calling. I stopped answering her. Then there started to be rumors that Albert was hitting me. Even at church, people said they heard the rumors. I knew it was my mother again. I told Albert, maybe she thinks you'll leave me if she makes rumors. He told me it was okay, and he would never leave me. Ever since we met, we have always loved each other so much, and we're always happy together, even when we had no money, and even now that we're here in this place. My mother never stopped calling me and never stopped making rumors. My husband would get attacked, and several times he was arrested, and I had to explain to the police what was happening. One time, a man punched me in the face and apologized and told me that someone had given him a lot of money to punch me. Then another man hit me, and after that, I was always being attacked. People thought it was Albert. We moved many times, but everywhere we went, it happened. Several times, Albert said that he would not leave if I wanted him to. He did not want me to be hurt anymore. He didn't want Philip to grow up being told his father was a wife beater. I told him that as long as he wanted to be with me, I would never ask him to leave. It was the only thing in my life that made me happy after my mother caused me to suffer so much. Albert and Philip and I have suffered so much because of my mother. Every night I prayed to God, please, Lord, let her die so she can no longer make my family suffer. And I also prayed for forgiveness because she was still my mother and I knew I should love her. And you know, I do still love her, even until now. I cannot love what she does to my family, but she is still my mother, and I hate the things she does, but I still love. The last time I talked to her on the phone, I said, I still love you even though I also love Albert. My love for you is not less because I also love him. And she cried and told me that she's lonely in her big house. She said her house was always getting bigger and it would not stop. She told me that sometimes she gets lost in her big house and it's full of toys and dresses for her grandchildren and her children, but she's all alone and she can't get out. I don't know if she'll ever stop making our family suffer, but I do not feel angry at her anymore. I know that as much as she is hurting us, she's hurting even more, and that's because of the things she did when she was alive. I pray for her soul every day. Even if she could no longer make her phone calls, and we're happy here, I would still pray for her to be at peace because she is my mother. Addendum. The following is a statement from SCP-2190's supervising researcher, Dr. Jethro Bostonero, regarding SCP-2190's containment procedures. I'll go ahead and read this here for you. Okay, let's see. Over the past few years, a number of colleagues have approached me with concerns about SCP-2190's containment. Essentially, the question people seem to have is, why are we spending so much money and manpower on the current containment procedures when the anomaly could potentially be rendered inert by separating -2 and -3? Rest assured that alternate containment procedures were proposed and considered. The containment procedures that are currently in place were specifically selected and approved by the O5 Council for the following reasons. Firstly, intentionally separating -2 and -3 would constitute the attempted neutralization of an anomalous phenomenon. Neutralization attempts are only to be carried out if the anomaly in question poses a significant risk to normalcy and humanity at large. SCP-2190 does not meet this requirement. "We are not the coalition. We contain, not destroy," is an age-old mantra that I'm sure you're tired of hearing, but it's still very applicable to this situation. Secondly, the present set of containment procedures aren't nearly as extravagant as detractors have suggested. It's standard practice to have undercover field agents in large population centers, and Baguio is no exception, so we're not losing any extra manpower. The modified SIM cards are paid for by the sales of phones themselves, and therefore cost us nothing. There's also a third reason, which is quite simply sentiment. It's no secret that suicide rates are high among Foundation personnel, a fact that is generally attributed to the difficult decisions we have to make and the actions we have to perform for the greater good. SCP-2190 is something of a victory, a rare case in which containing an SCP means allowing a family who has endured a living hell to finally live happily ever after. The value of the morale boosts provided by these feel-good stories cannot be overstated. If you have any other questions or concerns regarding SCP-2190, feel free to call me anytime during regular business hours. Dr. Jethro Bastonero. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was SCP-2190 dismissed.